Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Public Works Committee. I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening. And for folks who don't have a seat available, there is overflow viewing available in the council chamber. That's at your option. I don't think we're running immediately afoul of any fire code, so if you want to lean against the wall at this point, I think we're okay on that. Thank you for coming this evening. As I mentioned, this is the Public Works Committee. My name is Dan Bessie. I chair the committee. I'm joined by my colleagues who are members of the committee and other members of the council who are interested in this evening's agenda. We don't often have this many folks out at a Public Works Committee meeting, so thank you for taking the time to come out this evening.
The Dan Bessie fan club.
Yeah. As usual, we have a consent agenda and a general agenda, and it's the practice of the council and our committees to take the consent agenda items first. If there are any of the consent agenda items on which there is discussion needed, we'll pull that. Otherwise, we'll take anything else on the consent agenda in one motion. Are there any items on the consent agenda that need to be pulled?
C2 and C6.
C2 and C6.
C4 and C5.
C4 and C5, okay.
If there's no others, I move approval of the balance.
Second.
All right, is there discussion on that motion? If not, those in favor of approving items C1, C3, C7, and C8, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. That's unanimously approved, and let's go to C2, please.
Consideration of items relating to the Salem Creek Connector Streetscape Improvements Project.
Mr. Turner will present. Mr. Montgomery, did you want a full presentation?
Yes.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this item, well, let me get to the right item. There we go. This item is to request participation in the Betterments project. NCDOT has done some work is doing some work on the Salem Creek Connector project, and we're asking for a resolution to amend the agreement with NCDOT and an agreement with Creative Corridors Group in order that additional design services cost estimation work can be incorporated into the work NCDOT is doing. The city will act as a pass-through agent, entering into an agreement with NCDOT and with Creative Corridors to receive Creative Corridors funding to pass through to NCDOT for additional design work associated with getting confirmation of cost estimates for betterments associated with the project.
All right. The additional dollars that are here, can you speak specific to those? The dollars, the $200,000 and the $500,000, $200,000 from the North Carolina DOT Small Construction Fund and the $500,000 from the Secretary of Transportation Contingency Fund?
It's our understanding that those have been earmarked for the project and are an indication of previous commitment for this work by NCDOT.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we pulled this, that it could be spoken to, because as we continue to see all the work and construction happening there, I think it's important just for folk to know the additional pieces that are continuing to work, because I think there's continued question there. People are saying, well, when are we going to see some things happen where we know you got to have the groundwork first before it can happen. And the good thing about this that I like is that it's going to be value engineered, which means that we'll be able to get to a price that we can set our feet on when it comes to the design, and then that design will come back to this committee and council for full consideration. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And so this item addresses additional funding for the architectural and aesthetic improvements for Salem Creek Connector.
For the cost estimation associated with, yes, sir.
All right. Is there further discussion? Mr. Clark.
I'll make a comment here, and it also applies to one of the things on the general agenda. We have the Salem Connector 52 project, which is currently underway. You can see the dirt being moved. And then in a few years, we're going to totally redo Business 40 through downtown. On both projects, and I guess MLK's also got some work going on all of these projects, there is an effort to have some aesthetic enhancements, et cetera. My concern is how much water's in the well, how much total funds do we have, and and where do we want to spend them, and what's the priority? Because I have a feeling we're not going to afford everything. So do you want to do this? If we do that, does that eliminate us doing something somewhere else? I think it would be nice, Mr. Turner, if we could have kind of a comprehensive, add everything up, I think, before we spend too much. And I know this is just money to go get the estimates. But I think we also need to know what the estimates are for the enhancements that we got to pay for on the business 40 or on MLK and all that, so we can see what does it add up to and do. And if we don't have enough money, and again, I suspect that will be true, what are the priorities and what gets done and what doesn't get done? Thank you.
Ms. Light?
One of the things, I went back and looked at the bond language, and it using any of that money is very specifically laid out for different greenway projects, whatever. And I think it's $1 million for aesthetic improvements to Business 40 work. So most of that is pretty well laid out, I think. And if any extra money is going to come from either the state or our general fund or something like that. But the bond money seems to be very definite about what it can be used for.
Well, what I'm saying, if it's $1 million, what do you want for the $1 million?
Yeah.
Spend out
yeah.
on one bridge?
Yeah, no. But
4 bridges, depends on what things cost.
and certainly, it sounds like Creative Corridors is raising extra money for some of those improvements, so we'll keep our fingers crossed.
And of course, to a degree, I mean, naturally, we do appreciate all the information that staff can give us about total commitments and total money available, but they're only going to be able to go so far because to a substantial degree, we're competing with projects around the state seeking additional funding for enhancements. Mr. McIntosh.
I just want to pass on kudos to both the staff and C3 Creative Corridors and also NCDOT staff. This was a really complex project, and I think that everybody's gone as far as they can to figure out ways to make this look something other than the state DOT bridge that they just would normally foist on us and say, here's your bridge. So it's been a new process for everybody, and I think the state, I think Pat Ivey and his crowd have gone very far and helped us as much as they can. And I think the other people around the table have worked really hard too. I think we're going to end up with as good a project as we can get, and I think it's going to be a credit to everybody here.
Okay. Mr. Montgomery.
Last comment, in reference to it now, for the 52 project, particularly the Salem Creek Connector and the MLK ones, we have already committed the funds to both of those, correct?
We've committed to MLK. I'm not sure about 52.
Okay.
But definitely MLK.
All right.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? If not, those in favor of approval, this would be items A and B. Please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous. And we will move now to item C4, please.
Consideration of items related to city participation in local improvements of private streets. The public hearing on this item should be held on June the 1st, 2015.
And I believe, Mr. Montgomery, you had asked for this item.
Item
No, I'm
C4 is
sorry.
an item I asked for,
Taylor,
Mr.
I'm
Chairman. Just for informational purposes, I had this item pulled. Mr. Turner, if you can give us a brief explanation as to what we're doing here. The reason why I had this brought up is some of you experienced the same thing in some of our rural areas. A little bit before I came on the council, there were a number of areas who were annexed into the city and who now have a number of private roads. They're looking to bring those roads up to standard so that the city can maintain them going forward to make the necessary repairs. And hopefully, this particular item may serve as a roadmap to the communities who are not quite sure how to bring their roads up to city standards. So I wanted to have this presented so that anybody who may be watching this publication can understand how it's done moving forward. Mr. Turner, if you will.
Certainly. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the city has adopted a sliding scale for the last item that is usually required to get a road accepted for the city. If a private road has been built or a road has been built as a public street but never accepted by the city for maintenance, there are several things that have to happen. One is there has to be a certain amount of right-of-way. Another is some of the utilities have to be in place. And the last is that the pavement condition has to be up to current city standards. Oftentimes, the only item that remains for some of our older neighborhoods or some of our more recently annexed neighborhoods is that requirement to bring the pavement condition up to existing city standards. Prior to the last annexation by the city, it was a policy or ordinance that actually called for the city to require the neighborhood to bring that pavement up to standard at their cost, or to have some sort of cost sharing with the city where the cost ratio was based upon how much the average materials cost by the city were for paving and how much the average labor costs were for the residents, or vice versa. What the council adopted after the last annexation was a sliding scale to be more fair to economically disadvantaged neighborhoods. And the way the sliding scale works is that the city looks at the average price of land in the neighborhood that's being requested for having the streets made public versus the average cost of land prices throughout the rest of the city, or throughout the whole of the city. And depending on how the neighborhood or how that ratio works out, a neighborhood can be eligible for up to a 100% of that resurfacing cost being covered by the city, down to as little as none of that cost being eligible by the city. Although I think as a practical matter, 30% is the 70% by the city and 30% by the neighborhood is the lowest ratio. So the bottom line is that this neighborhood has gone through the sliding scale process and comes in at 90% funded by the city, 10% funded by the neighborhood. And that, again, is due to the relative cost of the land values in the neighborhood. Be happy to answer any questions.
Well, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say that this is one of the Southeast Ward neighborhoods to step forward to participate in the program. I think this committee and this council encourages the other neighborhoods who are willing to do the same thing, bring their streets up to city standards. We'll be happy to work with you. Mr. Turner, thank you for the presentation. Mr. Chairman, at this time, I move for approval of this item.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there further discussion? If not, those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. That's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And let us consider item C5, please.
Consideration of items related to parking rates and times of parking.
And this was, who asked for this one?
I did.
All right, Mr. Taylor.
Uh,
And would you like a full presentation?
Well, we don't want to belabor the hour, Mr. Turner. Just maybe a brief presentation, Mr. Chairman. I had this item pulled because I will be abstaining from voting on this item for further consideration. But Mr. Turner, since we've got an audience, if you can give us a brief presentation.
Certainly. This item is to allow a entity, PMC Properties Group, which is the group that's doing the hotel in the Reynolds Tower, to lease 200 parking spaces in the Fourth Church Chestnut Deck for a period of 22 years, and to pay for that up front. The city already has an ordinance provision that allowed for an entity that wanted to lease up to 400 spaces to be able to do so and pay for those up front. This is lowering that requirement to, or that threshold, to 200 spaces, and also has a resolution to approve a long-term lease for 22 years to PMC Group.
All right.
Nothing further for me at this time.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or discussion? Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
All right, is there further discussion? If not, those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no.
One abstention.
And one abstention. So that moves forward with 3 in favor, none opposed, and 1 abstain. Item C6, please.
Winston-Salem State University Bicycle Pedestrian Transit Study Update.
All right, thank you. And I believe this was finally the one that Mr. Montgomery had asked for. Would you like a full presentation?
Please.
Mr. Turner, please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, City Department of Transportation staff had a group of interns from Winston-Salem State to work for us last summer, as I recall. And as part of their educational activity with the university and as part of their work activity with us, they gave us several recommendations for changes that they thought would improve safety in and around the university. Amongst those were that Martin Luther King Jr. Drive at Cromartie Street, Martin Luther King Jr. Drive at Rams Drive, Martin Luther King Jr. Drive at Reynolds Park Road were critical intersections for student crossing, and they made several recommendations for enhancements to those roads. Things like traffic calming, traffic signal expansion to accommodate pedestrians, etc. Staff with the city's DOT have reviewed their recommendations. There, as we've sort of alluded to, already a project going on in the area, the Salem Creek Connector. One of the things about the Salem Creek Connector is that it is anticipated to divert some of the traffic off of Martin Luther King Jr. Drive and city DOT staff is recommending that the recommendations from the from the students group be considered for implementation after the new roadway project is complete. Be happy to answer any questions.
Montgomery.
I just kind of question in terms of waiting at that time. I do know that we're looking at a reduction in potential traffic that comes through the area. But the fact is that even though the traffic number of cars per day that will drive through there changes, it doesn't take away the risk factor for the people who are crossing the street. And so regardless of the fact of the number of vehicles that are coming there, I question how much that's going to influence the best recommendations in terms of additional features that can be done to help deal with that. And so I would like to see us begin to do something now in terms of looking at what we're doing to help address those issues and not wait until Salem Creek Connector piece is done.
Other questions or comments? Mr. Clark?
My only response to that is I'm going to be real curious to see what it does to the traffic on MLK through the campus. And if it is substantial enough, you may even go to the extent of going from a 4-lane back to a 2-lane road there. I mean, it could be an order of magnitude change, but we don't know. I think it's terrible we have a 4-lane road that goes kind of through a campus. And I think I would love to see us do a lot there. And it said even to the extent of going back to 2-lane from 4-lane. But that's that is a very substantial change, and I would not want to do that until I knew the traffic count and how much of that traffic is going to go on to the new Southeast Connector, whatever that thing is.
Salem Creek Connector.
Yeah, I mean,
Having said that, I know there's some intersections if we want to do something there.
Right.
But I think that we may be wanting to do a lot more on MLK through there.
yeah, there are substantial improvements that have already been made to enhance pedestrian safety in that section through.
We put the fence up to keep people from jaywalking on it.
and signaled crossings for pedestrians at I think 2 or 3 points in that section, and the additional measures are things that would, as you indicate, narrow the lanes or perhaps drop it. And one of the considerations is what does that do to traffic backup and flow? And once the Salem Creek Connector is open, that should alleviate a lot of the pressure from that section of MLK and permit us to consider steps that are more aggressive in terms of pedestrian and cycling enhancements for that section. Mr. Taylor.
I just want to state I work very closely with the 3 Winston-Salem State University students that participated in this particular study. There are 2 additional students that will start June the 1st, and hopefully they'll be able to see this project through its implementation stages. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to think that, the first group of students opened the can of bees, and now once the bees are out, we can finally see it through.
Yeah. But, Mr. Turner, there isn't any reason why we can't continue to work on this.
Absolutely not.
So.
And that was a terrible analogy, by the way, but you got the point.
We let it go.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
All right. This was an information item. No vote needed, Mr. Montgomery?
And so in working on that, what is working on? That's what I, in terms of we're working on it, but what does it mean working on it?
There's no reason that staff can't come forward with additional steps, to recommend even between now and opening of Salem Creek Connector, but that would, require potentially council action. Mr. Turner?
As you can see by the memo, one of the things that will have to be done is we will have to have a professional to model what the effects would be with the traffic changes that we're anticipating. So I think the next step would be to go ahead and start the process of selecting a professional consulting firm to assist with that type of modeling.
Is there any way, and I know that there are implications once Salem Creek Connector opens, but is there any way for us to be able to have some tiered list that if traffic, because there's a standard that we use in terms that we'd be able to look at, so if traffic count falls below this point, these particular items are feasible to be done, and these are not, just based upon where they are, so that we can at least begin the process of looking at what's feasible, so that once we get to that place, we can have less work to do and begin to look at it. And my reason is because there consistently is issues around pedestrian safety in and around the Winston-Salem State University areas. And as a councilman of the area, I think it's my duty to make sure we make it as quickly as we possibly can, anything that we can do to help make sure that is dealt with in a way that keeps folks safe. And if we are going to wait on that time for Salem Creek Connector, I'd like for us to be in a place that if we decide we want to do something, we have as much information as possible, and then adding those traffic numbers would help us to make the decision on what items are before us.
We can look at something like that, yes.
All right. And what is the current projected completion date for the connector?
August 2016, I believe.
So basically another year and a few months.
Yes.
Okay. So we're not talking
But
too
the
much
closer
longer.
it gets, the further it is. So.
That's a good way to look at it.
All right. Anything else on this side?
Yes, please.
I'm sorry, Ms. Light.
Just a question for Mr. Turner. Notice that one of the things that is on the list of to do is bike lanes. Are bike lanes predicated on a certain flow of traffic? In other words, it can be too traffic heavy to put in a bike lane as it stands now?
I think the bike lane concept is based upon only having one travel lane in each direction, and then the rest of the pavement being for a bike lane in that same direction.
Oh, okay, all right.
And speaking of the completion date on Salem Creek Connector, I know that that's of interest to a number of cyclists, in particular that uses the Salem Creek Greenway and who sort of cycle up the hill for the detour. I've been contacted by people who are anxious to go back to the full Greenway route. So,
I understand.
yeah. All right, thank you. Then let's go then to the general agenda. Item G1, please.
Bicycle program update.
And this is the item that I suspect is of most interest to most of the folks in the audience. I confess I did invite members of the community with a particular interest in cycling and greenways to come participate this evening, and I'm actually pleasantly surprised by the number of folks who took time from their cycling to come in. And if you would introduce yourself for anyone in the audience who doesn't know you, sir.
Sure. My name is Matthew Burchek. I'm the Bicycle and Pedestrian Coordinator for the City of Winston-Salem.
Please continue.
All right. Good evening, council members. Thank you for the opportunity. It's appropriate since it's National Bike Month, and also we're in the middle of Bike to Work Week. So this is a good topic, and I'm glad to see all the advocacy, all the support for cycling in the community. So tonight I just wanted to give you a brief rundown of where we stand with cycling in the city and what we have planned. I think to this point, and we have a strong recreational background in cycling. I think where we're headed is integrating cycling into the transportation network. In order to see the full benefits of cycling, we need to have it integrated into that transportation network. I think individuals will see the benefits in their health, and then the community will see the benefits in terms of livability and local economic development. So the approach we take is the 5 E's. It's a pretty standard approach, but we have elements of our program within each of these categories, so I'm going to touch on some of those elements within these categories in this presentation. So the engineering side, this is kind of the side that everybody recognizes. This is the greenways, the bike lanes, the bike parking, all of the things that really drive ridership. So this is an early snapshot of our on-street network of bike lanes and shared lane markings. Greenways are great, but we will always rely on streets for cycling. All the destinations are along streets, so even if you ride most of your trip on a greenway, you're going to end up on a street at some point. So we really need to design the streets and engineer them in a way that make them accessible for cyclists. So this is what we looked like maybe a few years ago. We currently have 17 miles of on-street facilities. Our emphasis is on adding to that existing network. So you can see we're building off of what we already have. The Salem Creek Greenway runs through there. We have some bike lanes through there. We're trying to add on to that network because it doesn't work to have a bike lane for a mile here and a mile there unless it's all connected. It needs to be connected for it to be a viable transportation option. Fortunately, with the passage of the bond referendum last fall, there was funding available for adding on-street bike facilities. So this is what we have proposed, part of what we have proposed for those on-street improvements. Again, building on the network that we have, trying to connect to the greenways where possible, and really focusing on destinations and building that network. The greenway side of things, we have about 23 miles of greenways right now. What you see here is about 4 miles worth of projects that are currently funded and in one way or another getting ready for construction. So they're somewhere in the design process, some with construction imminent, with some maybe a couple years down the road. But all of these projects are funded and ready for that design and construction phase. I'm sorry, going back one step to the on-street facilities, one thing I should note is that we're going to face some challenges as we try to build these next 30 or so miles of bike lanes. We've kind of, the lanes that we have out there right now were kind of the low-hanging fruit, where we had extra width in the travel lanes or we didn't have any on-street parking issues. As we look at some of those projects that are coded in green there, we're going to start dealing with those on-street parking issues and some decisions on how to allocate space for cyclists, motor vehicles, and parking. So we'll all need to work together on making some of those decisions. In addition to the bike lanes and the greenways, we also have to take advantage of some of the major roadway projects that are coming up. So I mentioned the Salem Creek Connector a bit ago. We have a series of greenways and side paths planned with that, so that cyclists will have a route from the Salem Creek Greenway up through the Innovation Corridor and on the Greenway project that's proposed through there. So again, trying to capitalize on some of these projects that are out there and add to the network. Business 40, the discussion last week obviously about all the bicycle and pedestrian improvements associated with that, whether it's the Green Street Bike Ped Bridge, the Strollway, which will now go over Business 40, proposals to put bike lanes on Liberty, Main, and Broad Streets, and then the multi-use path. So, these are once-in-a-lifetime projects, and there's an opportunity here to really to aid in the transportation network for cycling and really build that up.
Could you hold there for a second? I know that there was a quite reasonable question raised as to the extent of potential interest in this facility if it were available. I'm interested in, can folks see what's on the screen? Would those who might be interested in using that facility if it was available, please stand.
30 in the hall.
30 in the hall.
Already standing.
All right. Thanks very much. Some more folks are running in to be counted as standing. Thank you. Don't go away. We'll be inviting feedback additionally later. Please go ahead.
Sure. And I think one of the reasons there is such support for that is because the current options that people have to go east-west through downtown are 1st Street, 2nd Street, both of which are extremely hilly, very narrow, and full of traffic. So having the side paths, having a path along Business 40, relatively flat, car-free environment, would probably be a pleasure to ride on to get from downtown to Baptist Medical Center, to Ardmore, to West End. A lot of destinations, a lot of starting points for trips. And then we've also been working on end-of-trip facilities. So if we have bike lanes, we have greenways, but we have no place for people to park when they get to their destination, or we don't have showers, whatever it is, we need those end-of-trip facilities as well. So over the past couple of years, we've added about 150 bike racks throughout town. We've added some art bike racks working with local artists. And we'll continue to figure out where bike parking is needed as we see a demand. I'm sure there's a demand outside here right now. We'll look at that and we'll add racks as necessary. The next part of the formula is encouragement, and this is one area where we've really shined. Walk and Roll Winston-Salem is our Open Streets event. We have the longest running Open Streets event in North Carolina. And Open Streets is a worldwide movement where cities temporarily shut down streets to motor vehicles so that cyclists, pedestrians, skaters, people can come out, enjoy those streets in a car-free environment. So we've had this program since 2010. We revised it, rebranded it, relaunched it this year. We had been averaging about 300 people attending our event. This year we shot up to nearly 1,200. So there's definitely interest in having this kind of an event. And I think we give people a safe place to ride and walk, and they take advantage of it. The next thing there is Bike Month. So I mentioned May is Bike Month. We have events pretty much scheduled almost every day. You can check out some of those events on the website, cityofws.org/Bike Month. Some more shots from Walk and Roll Winston-Salem. I was really impressed with the turnout and the variety, the diversity of the turnout. We had representation from probably 25 or 30 different schools from throughout the community, throughout the MPO actually. So we had a very good group there. More encouragement, it's the Winston-Salem Cycling Classic, so that will cap off Bike Month, May 30th and 31st. It's a series of events, races throughout the community. So that's adding to the visibility of cycling in the community. Some of those same folks who organized the Cycling Classic are also working to bring an Olympic cycling center to Liberty Street downtown. Nothing is official yet, but if we have world-class athletes coming here to train, we'll need to keep up with our facilities as well to give them places to ride and ways to get out into the surrounding areas where there is such great riding so they can train. We're also bringing the Masters Racing, the Road National Championships in 2016 and 17. I highlighted there the proposed or the estimated economic impact of that is $2.7 million. So in addition to the health benefits, the livability benefits of cycling, there's also an opportunity for economic development as well. The next component to our program is education. You can see our Safe Routes to School program. That's kind of the big element of our education program. That trailer you see, we take around a fleet of bikes to different schools around the community, and then we work with the FIAD teachers and have them train their students on the bike safety skills. And we've actually worked that into the school system's curriculum so that the bike safety skills are a part of their education program now. In the 4 years that we've had this program, we've run about 5,000 students through the education program, so very successful. The trailer is rented constantly throughout the school year. The other component is evaluation. So this is a shot of us installing bicycle and pedestrian counters at the Salem Lake Trail. We were selected to be a part of NCDOT's pilot project for bike and pedestrian counts. NCDOT has had a motor vehicle count for years, but this is the first time they're really focusing on doing bicycle and pedestrian counts. We had a project that we worked on with the Center for Design Innovation where we built our own counters. NCDOT was impressed with that, so they selected us to be a part of their pilot project. So working with them, we selected 5 different locations throughout the city and installed counters at those locations. It was about probably a $30,000 investment on their part so that we will have continuous count data for cyclists and pedestrians.
Do you have any preliminary data back from that?
Yeah, the next slide, actually, there's a little snippet of that. So I showed you the Salem Lake Trail. This is West End Boulevard. That post there is actually the pedestrian counter, and you can see the loops cut into the street counting cyclists. And this was a snapshot of the Salem Lake Trail. Now keep in mind, these numbers are from October through February, so the winter months where cycling is most likely down. But even with the weather conditions, it's a little bit hard to read, but that spike you see is Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock, where we were still averaging 40 cyclists per hour going through. And I can provide more of this data. We have charts like this for all of the locations, bike and pedestrian, so I'll be happy to share that. But
and just for the record, when I asked for where they'd be, they wouldn't give me the information, so I couldn't rig it.
So just to cap things off, we were recognized as a bicycle-friendly community by the League of American Bicyclists in 2013 at the bronze level. It's pretty much the entry level for bicycle-friendly communities. We can still rise to silver, gold, platinum. But in order to do that, we need to show an improvement in the number of people cycling for transportation. So getting back to those infrastructure improvements, it's absolutely crucial that we have those. All the education and encouragement programs go a long way, but even without those programs, if we can build the infrastructure, give people safe places to ride, places to park their bikes, that's really what's going to drive bicycle trips for transportation. So I know we can rise to the silver level very easily if we work on some of that. So that's all. I'm happy to answer any questions, though.
Mr. Clark.
The count, was that at Salem Lake?
That is the Salem Lake Trail, yeah.
And we have other counts?
Yeah, so West End Boulevard was one location, 4th Street downtown, the Strollway, Academy Street. I don't know if I'm leaving one out there, but
Are
I
those
think
all currently counting?
they are, yeah, 24 hours a day they're out.
So we'll have, in
counting.
a couple of months, we'll have.
That's right, yeah, they should release the next quarter of data soon.
Ms. Light?
Tell me, Matthew, if you know this. I've always been concerned about Winston-Salem drivers' disregard of pedestrians.
Mm-hmm.
Do the bicyclers find that same problem, that they get run off the road by, was that a yes?
It sounds like it, yeah. And I mean, it's definitely an issue. I think it's an issue nationwide. The one category I didn't mention was enforcement, because it's the toughest category to work on. But
Yeah.
some of the things we're doing right now with the police department are focused on education. But the next step for us, what we've discussed with the Downtown Bike Patrol, is actually having some operations where they would have set up a sting, essentially, and cite drivers who did not yield to pedestrians and crosswalks. I think that's probably the best way for us to start that kind of a campaign, and then move on to cyclists after that. So, or onto drivers who are, giving cyclists a hard time after that. One thing we did, we've been focusing on education to this point because bike lanes here, the infrastructure is relatively new. So last fall, we worked with the marketing department, had a Share the Road campaign. So we'll continue to do things like that, but after we've kind of saturated the market with education, it's time to start with the enforcement. That's the next step for us. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
It is,
Mr. McIntosh.
Mr. Chairman, it is a serious concern because we've had serious accidents associated with bicyclists being hit by cars. So we
Yeah.
are very concerned about it.
Mr. McIntosh?
Anecdotally, I've heard that it's getting better. I hear attitudes are changing, although it's a very slow process, but I have heard that cyclists find that they are given right away much more often, so I think we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, and even without all of the infrastructure in place yet, I think I've been seeing more cyclists, and I think everybody has. The more cyclists we have on the road, the better drivers will respond, and it just kind of snowballs after that. We get more cyclists, we get more infrastructure. Again, we have more cyclists, the drivers respond, they recognize that, so it's all going to work together.
I do have to say, years before I was elected to council, I remember being very proud that we had your position on staff here in Winston-Salem. I just thought that was a great message to send to the rest of the city or cities and states around, and I thank you for all your hard work.
I appreciate it too.
I will say, I think if there are actually 30 or so folks that are still outside the room, we probably have about 70 people here tonight. That's the largest turnout I can recall having for a Public Works Committee meeting. So I appreciate everybody taking the time to come and participate this evening. Is there anyone who would like to make any brief comments? And not asking everybody to come up, but yes, I see three hands. Lady on the row there. Please step forward, give us your name and address for the record, and to the mic, if you would.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
I'm Anna Clara. I moved here 8 years ago.
And you are, I'm sorry?
Anna Clara Mello.
Okay. And live here in
I
Winston-Salem?
live in Winston-Salem.
Okay.
I've been living here for 8 years now.
Okay. Please go ahead.
I came from Gainesville, Florida, where bike lanes are all over, and people did use them to go to work and to school. There were problems with safety, and one of the things they did was to put those sound bands separating the road from the bike lane. So those drivers that got distracted with,
Rumble strips.
yeah,
Yeah.
if they slide through to go over the bike path, would hear that sound and would immediately go off. So that improved very, very much the safety of the bike lanes. So that was.
Thank you. That's a thoughtful suggestion. And I know that one of the things that we have been working on is getting the grates aligned properly in locations where that was a tire catch hazard for cyclists. Mr. Turner?
Just need to make sure we get our address for the record.
If you wouldn't mind, for the record, if we can get your address?
I'm sorry?
For the record, we ask all the folks who speak to give their name and address.
Okay. Should I?
Just, you can speak in the mic, it's cool.
Okay, it's Anna Clara Mello, and I live at 462 Pagebrook Drive in Winston-Salem, 27106.
Thank you so much. Next person who had their hand up, I believe, yes, ma'am, in the red blouse. And I see you, Linda. We'll get back to you.
Hi, I'm Judy Wallace, and I just want you to know that even grandmothers ride bicycles. Sometimes we have the image of cyclists as all young white males in Lycra, but there are other ways to ride. I ride my bike to the Y, I ride it to the grocery store. I try to use my bike for transportation with it whenever I can for anything under 2 miles. And I know that there are a lot of other people. If there are people in the room who also use their bikes for transportation, could you stand up, please? So while some of us ride the Greenway and we enjoy the recreational aspect, we also use our bikes instead of our cars because we like being outside on our bikes. So
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. And in fact, one of the things that we're working on as a point of emphasis is connectivity, putting the biking facilities and the greenways together in a fashion that permits more transportation use. If you look at the facilities that are already funded that we anticipate having construction underway in the next 2 to 3 years, you'll see things like the strollway the rails with trails from downtown, the completion finally of the Brushy Fort Greenway connection that would bring the northeastern quadrant of Winston-Salem into direct connection with the Salem Creek, Salem Lake Spinal Trail system, the Walltown connector to open up a direct connection with the entire Walltown neighborhood and community with Salem Creek, the neighborhood connectors from across Muddy Creek to the Muddy Creek Greenway and similar facilities. Yeah, we're working on that angle. And Linda, if you'll step forward, and you're one of my constituents, so I know where you are, but if you'll tell for the
Linda
record.
Pass, 2425 Westfield Avenue.
Mhm.
I just had a quick comment about the multi-use path, that I'd like to see it integrated with opportunities to add art along the way and some greenery, some oaks or trees, some big trees to shade it and make it look better. But we're the city of arts and innovation, and even if we can't afford to put art on it now, that we leave space and opportunity for somebody to come back and add it later. So,
Thank you. And someone else behind Judy had their hand. Yes, ma'am, if you'll step forward, please.
Hi, my name is Amy Easter. I live at 3407 Luther Street. I am part of a cycling advocacy group called Beers and Gears in the area. I've lived here now for a year. I lived in Raleigh, North Carolina for the past 5 years before that, and I just wanted to share my experience there. I started riding my bike as an adult again when I lived in Raleigh, and I found it was very conducive to riding. I commuted to work. I was able to ride downtown. I could even get groceries. I find that true here as well in Winston-Salem, but I think there's definitely a lot of room for improvement, and I'm excited that there seems to be a lot of people in support of that, and I appreciate your consideration. I do think that the multi-use path is a great opportunity for us to make a big improvement in that networking that Matthew so well, described. And I also will attest to the economic impacts to supporting this segment of the population. I know in Raleigh, because there was such a big bike culture there, we brought a lot of money downtown and we spent a lot of money downtown. They actually just finished up a 10-day cycling festival called Oaks and Spokes, which had many events, partnering with lots of local businesses, and it definitely brought a lot of money. So while we don't do everything for the money, I think there's a lot of money to be brought into the city by including cyclists. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. And I think it's worth noting that one of the things that Winston-Salem has been addressing as a challenge for a number of years is being more appealing to a younger demographic. And clearly this is the type of facility that would help to accomplish that goal. Did anyone else want to, got a couple of folks in the back, if you'll step up and let us hear from you.
Hey, I'm Jake Easter. I live with Amy.
Okay.
I would like to touch on the economic stuff as well. There are actually hard data points that Alta Planning and Design have put out recently about how cyclists frequent local businesses more often than people in cars, especially in a downtown environment, and on average spend more money per month at those businesses than a motorist does. And if any of you would like to have those numbers that I didn't bring with me, I'd be happy to email them to you. So
Please go ahead, and if you have trouble finding my email, I'm sure Matthew can get it to you.
I've got all of your emails.
And there was another gentleman with his hand up. If you'll step forward, please.
My name's Bill Petrie Jr., Petrie. I live at 755 Laycock Avenue in Royal Hall, North Carolina. I moved back here about 3 years ago and met Matthew, and I'm a representative of the community bike ride that he started. Oh. And I ride into town and I ride downtown. I think Winston-Salem's at a crossroads right now. We're going through a bit of an identity crisis. And I think we need to embrace this idea of the cyclist, that we could reinvent ourselves. The same visionary that, Joseph Reynolds, the idea he had of uniting the city, and I think we could unite it under something else and take it a step in the future, not just aside from looking at everything else, but the mindset. Cycling has saved my life. I was a high blood patient, and I started riding again after getting my blood pressure down. It's kept it down, and then part of the community bike ride, which is a family-oriented event, has kept and brought awareness to several bike shops in town. We haven't had a slow ride that's lasted this long, and it's still continuing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes.
I'll be brief. Lynn Mitchell, 1270 Foxhall Drive, 27106. And my day job, I work for the health department. And what's really important for us when we try to improve the health of the community is we want exercise to be easy and convenient. So we need places for people to recreate, which includes bike and pedestrian facilities. So basically some of the decisions, a lot of the decisions you make impact the work that we do in public health every day. So we appreciate the support because it makes all of us have a healthier community. Thank you.
Thank you. And Judy, as I remember, you work with the Safe Routes to School as well.
Yes.
And it took me a minute to recognize you without your bike helmet on. I'm sorry. Yes, another hand's up.
Hey, I'm Jordan Poe Crawford, 128 Taylor Street. I'm the manager of Camino Bakery downtown on 4th Street. We see a lot of local bike traffic. We've probably got a staff of about 35 employees, of whom I'd say about a third regularly cycle to and from work. In addition, that multi-use path from the Ardmore and the West End communities, that's where a majority of our clientele who are coming to downtown are coming from, and having that bike lane open would really be a great asset.
Great. Thank you. Well, thank you again for everyone coming out. We have some final comments, I think, from members of the committee. Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say thank all of you for your comments. I think this is what the public process is all about. One of my favorite things to talk about on this council, and everybody will attest to it, is I'm a native son of the city of Winston-Salem, born and reared in the area that I represent. And I say that to say that growing up, I can say that this city wasn't a very bicycle-friendly community. But now I'm proud to live in a bicycle-friendly community. And I think that's something that we should all be very proud of. I am a new cyclist, and I started on March the 5th. And If anybody's on Map My Run, send me a friend request because I'm barely making it. I mean, I'm that guy you see with the really big, heavy bicycle on the Salem Creek Greenway, barely making it around. So please send me a friend request for some encouragement. But I just want to say thank you for what you do. I do support the multi-use path along Business 40. I support cycling in the city of Winston-Salem. I want to thank all of the city staff and Mr. Burchek, all of the riders for what you do for our city. And I'm looking forward to continuing being a cyclist because I have seen some health improvements. I think other people should do it. I live right up Reynolds Park Road, which connects right into the Greenway. And there are a lot of other people like me. We want to encourage them to participate as well. So thanks for coming out and participating in the process.
Other comments? Mr. Clark.
Matthew, can you comment where the Salem Creek Connector is a new road? What cycling infrastructure did we put in on it?
So along the Salem Creek Connector, there will be side paths. So no infrastructure, not necessarily bike lanes in the street, but paths alongside of it.
Even better.
A separate path, yeah.
Yeah, separate path, and that'll connect down to the Salem Creek Greenway. That separate path will run up to Rams Drive where the existing Research Parkway is, and there's a current 10-foot path. Looks like a sidewalk, but it's a 10-foot path along there. As you go a little bit further north there, that path will veer away from the road a bit and then connect with the Innovation Quarter Railway Trail project.
So when the Salem Creek Connector is finished, you'll be able to leave the technology park and cycle around Salem Lake and back?
Well, there's one phase in there that I believe is funded. I would have to check on that, but that needs to be constructed yet after Salem Creek Connector is done and after the Innovation Quarter project is done. But there's definitely a plan to have all of that connected.
Second question. I do know some cyclists who have told me that the path around Salem Lake has been worn. I don't know if it's erosion or what condition is that in?
Right now, I've been out there recently. It's in fairly good condition. I actually have a road bike that I take out there. I think, it must have been maybe 3 years ago, the Parks Department completely resurfaced the whole trail.
Okay, so
it was absolutely beautiful after that. Okay. I think, slowly it starts to erode and you get more ditches and it's a little bit rougher, but I think overall it's in fairly good shape.
Yeah, it was in pretty.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was in pretty rough shape before the resurfacing.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Light.
You all have inspired me. I may have to dig my vehicle out of the garage. You will know if I've done it if you see an old lady with her tricycle. No bicycles for me, but a big old tricycle. So keep an eye out and give me plenty of room.
Salem Creek Trail would be an excellent starting point. Nice and flat. Yeah.
Oh, I like flat. Hills are no.
You can ride right beside me.
Okay.
Other comment? Mr. Montgomery.
Just a comment of thanking you all for coming out and participating tonight. There were chuckles around the table when we first started the meeting. Just you had to be at the last meeting to know why we were chuckling at this meeting. But there was whether or not the people would turn out in this manner. And I told Councilman Bessie, I'm glad I didn't bet him in terms of those who would turn out. But I think it just goes to the point of understanding in terms of those issues and those things that are important to people. They come out and they support. And I think this is just an example of that. And so we look forward to how we continue to integrate bike paths and more pedestrian-friendly instruments into our infrastructure across the city, because I think it only makes us a better community.
Yeah, and in fact, I will tell you candidly that at the last meeting, I said I thought that we could fill the room with cycling supporters and supporters of the multi-use path concept along I-40, and I immediately thought, oh, Lord. Did I promise something that we couldn't deliver? And I was greatly relieved when I walked in and saw the room full of folks. So, thank you for coming out this evening. And we have one more item on the agenda. You're welcome to stick around and hear it. But on behalf of the entire committee, thank you for your participation here this evening. We appreciate it. Item G2, please.
Resolution requesting the North Carolina Department of Transportation to provide funding for various betterments to the Business 40 reconstruction project in downtown Winston-Salem.
Mr. Turner.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the city staff was advised by NCDOT that it would be helpful as they are going through the process of doing the project on Business 40, if the city would go on record as requesting assistance for betterments as part of the project to be funded by them. Things that would be anticipated would be things like wider bridges, longer bridges to accommodate whatever betterments that we might have. And so we thought it would be appropriate for the city council to do so. What's in front of you is a resolution staking that position out.
And this is one of those cases where the amount of funding that we get is dependent on our competing with other jurisdictions, and if you don't ask for it, you don't get it.
Correct.
Comments or questions? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. That's unanimous, and that completes what we have on the scheduled agenda. Mr. Clark?
I have two items. Number one, I did get a request from somebody, I don't remember who. We have put in downtown some, they're nice little displays that have bags to clean up after your dog. I was wondering if we could maybe place those in some of the more suburban parks. I don't know if there's any around Haynes Park. I don't go to Haynes Park that much, but places like that, I've got a few, maybe Schaffner Park. I'm just trying to think, maybe Lineback Park, some of the more heavily used ones.
We can do that. I've made a similar request that was responded to favorably for Miller Park.
Yeah, Miller would be a good example.
And
Park as well.
Haynes.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yes, absolutely.
Okay. Number two, and I don't know if this is the right committee or not, but we're in the process of having a massive change in the bus routes.
Mm-hmm.
I am most concerned with the ability to successfully implement that, and I want to be sure that the seriousness of this is dealt with. I was talking with a company the other day who runs an ex-offender program, and virtually all their clients ride the bus, and right now the bus doesn't come close enough. And there's a case that the whole program could be dismantled if the folks can't get there. A most worthwhile program, I might add. It's one thing to change one route or not. We're changing every route, and I would say a lot of the stops are on all those routes. And when I say to take it seriously, yes, we can hold public hearings and this, that, and the other, but one day we're going to be on the old system, and the next day we're going to be on the new. I don't see any other way how to transition other than system A one day, system B the other. And so many people that ride the bus are dependent upon it to get to work and back. It's a very, very basic service that we provide. And I just want to be sure, and I don't know how to do it, but, well, if I was doing it, I would have done it totally different. I may have done it one route at a time or something, but I'm just concerned that Monday morning in July when we switch over, we're going to get an awful lot of calls on, I don't know how to get to work. And that's just concerns me. How are we going to, are the new bus stops going to be a different color sign than the old ones so people know which is which, or do you go through at night and take down all the old ones on Friday night and put the new ones up Saturday? Do we have enough people on a hotline if somebody can give them their address? I live at 423 Main Street. How do I get to Baptist Hospital that they can assist them with it? But so far, I'm 2 for 2 of the two people I know that ride the bus, that neither one of them are going to be able to ride it under the new system. It's not even close to where they live and where they work. So I just want to be sure we've properly thought through all that and be ready, for a lot of phone calls that Monday.
And this is the right committee, and that will come back to this committee for further discussion before anything is implemented. But the public input process is going on now.
Yes, I know that.
So, yes, Ms. White.
What you just said struck a real spark with me. Has it been considered to, Greg, to do this just one route at a time? Because otherwise it's going to be just horrible. I'm afraid, as you say, to do this implementation, that it's just one route at a time.
I can check for you. I'm not
Yeah, it's, I just.
The trouble is, you may have routes that go this way and the new ones go this way or something, so you just can't go one at a time. But I'm just having this nightmare of 1,000 phone calls that Monday morning of I can't get to work, and I just want to be sure we don't have that, or we have an answer.
Yeah, that's a risk that we need to address, and it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to have an interim report, come back from WISTA for this committee on how it's looking, at a point during the process, and discuss some of those issues. Because I can see, frankly, pretty clearly why trying to do it one route at a time would not work.
Yeah.
Redesigning the system, and you'd have loose ends hanging out all over. But it is going to be an implementation, challenge.
You can't depend on the internet either. We'll go put your address into this program and it tells you, because a lot of these folks don't go to the internet every day. So and I agree with you. I think it'd even be worse to do it route by route. But again, that's why I said I'm not sure how to do it. But I'm just having this bad feeling that we're going to have a lot of calls Monday morning or whatever day we do it. And maybe do it on the weekend first. Start on the weekend or something.
Really.
How you do it.
Mr. Montgomery?
Yeah, I just agree. I think in terms of that interim report, of kind of seeing where we are, something to come back. I know from my work daily that even now in the process of individuals hearing and that it's changing, some are even confused now. Some were starting to think, well, what's the new bus route of thinking that it's already changed as it's this similar process. But it's just all in our process of rolling this out, making sure that we're doing a great job of awareness. And I think that was something that was discussed very heavily when we first discussed these changes. And so I think those points are very, very well.
Mr. Flood?
Yeah, I want to say the City of Winston-Salem staff have done a good job keeping us, and I'll say me particularly, Mr. Turner, updated with some of the proposed route changes. The calls from me, Mr. Clark, have already started. I've received dozens upon dozens of calls, some of which I've shared with Mr. Turner and the DOT staff and WISTA staff. And at first, I understood some of the proposed route changes, but in terms of some of the Morningside community, some of the Green Oaks community in the southeastern portion of the city, I'm going to find severe difficulty with supporting those route changes, because people have surely come to me and called me and said, I won't be able to get to the doctor. I have to go every other day. I won't be able to get to work. I have to feed my family. We don't have a car. So I understand why it is a necessity to change the bus routes, but we can't do it at the expense of some of the high-volume riders. So it does give me some cause for concern, but I imagine our committee will further consider that. Now, there has to be a public process, and I told them my job is to speak up for them, but I don't think I'll be able to support those route changes because they've come out wholeheartedly and in high volume expressing concern about those two route changes.
Yeah. And one of the things I'll note in terms of total context is that the directive that WISTA understood it to be under was to propose a redesign to make most efficient use of the current level of resources. And we can choose to put additional funding into the system in order to accommodate making redesign efficiency changes, but continuing the service level to some of the places that would lose it. But that would have to be a full council budgeting decision. It's one that is within the authority of this committee to recommend if we identify specifics that we wish to see required of the redesign. But keep that in mind. And who had their hand up next?
One additional comment.
Yes.
When you were talking about the pooper scooper bags, again, I mentioned I do go around Salem Lake, and there's a horse or a couple of horses that go around Salem Lake, and they just use the restroom the entire trail. And I don't know if we need to get a super duper trash bag.
The bags aren't that big.
Get a super duper trash bag or something, but somebody needs to look into that.
Yeah, diapers.
You might can market that and make the city some money. Horse diapers. I like that.
They do it in New York City.
Okay, well, I stand corrected. If you look into that, Mr. Turner, I'd appreciate it.
All right. If there's nothing else, Mr. Turner, is there anything else?
No.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, and we are adjourned.